So this is part 2 of Who is Jesus? And the next passage I'd like us to look at, and I'm just kind of moving through the scriptures here in a pattern that maybe is more comfortable with people, just so you can kind of move through it with me rather than jumping around. John chapter 1, in verse 1, it says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." So there's a claim being made here that the Word, whoever that is, was with God and was God. There's no article added there. It wasn't a God. If you add the article a God, then you violate the first commandment of God, which is not to have any other gods besides him. Some people would say preeminent before him, but clearly God is saying, don't make graven images, don't do anything, don't put anybody else at the same level as me. So if this is somebody else other than Yahweh Jehovah, then we're violating that first commandment from Exodus chapter 20. So who is the Word? Well, it says in verse 14 of the same chapter, it says that the Word became flesh and dwelt for a while among us. So whoever that Word is the one that became flesh. So he's referring to Christ here, and he's referring to the incarnation of Christ. And so there's no violation of Exodus chapter 20, verse 1, or the first commandment of God. And so it allows us to get deeper insight and richer understanding of who Christ was. And then in John chapter 8, there's a discussion with the the elders and the authority, the religious authority of the day. The Jews are asking him questions, and they accusing him of being a Samaritan. There's all kinds of accusations. I personally believe this is because this was probably a stigma. His mother was an unwed mother, and probably not a lot of people believed it was a virgin birth, and there was probably a lot of that kind of stuff. So they called him a half-breed, a Samaritan. They called him all kinds of names, and it seems like it got under his skin here. But he's also trying to make a point, and they say the Jews said to him, "We know you have a demon. Abraham died, as did all the prophets, and you say, if anyone keeps my word, he will never taste death. Are you greater than our father Abraham who died?" By the way, this is starting in verse 52, if you want to go look this up yourself. "And the prophets died? Who do you make yourself out to be?" Jesus answered them, "If I glorify myself, my glory is nothing. It is my Father who glorifies me, of whom you say he's our God. But you have not known him, I know him. If I were to say that I did not know him, I would be a liar like you, but I do know him and I keep his word. Your father Abraham rejoiced that he would see my day. He saw it and was glad. So the Jews said to him, you are not yet 50 years old, and you have seen Abraham? Jesus said to them, listen carefully. Truly, truly, I say to you, before Abraham was, I am. This is the claim that he's making about himself. And if you don't think they understood what he was trying to say, you miss the balance of this passage where it says that they wanted to actually kill him for this because they saw it as the greatest amount of blasphemy. Then what we do is we look up into Acts chapter 2 as Peter's giving that first famous sermon and where people are hearing him speaking in different tongues and languages. The miracles either in the mouth or the ear or both. It's an incredible time. It's the establishing of the kingdom with power. And he says to the people, this Jesus delivered up according to the definitive plan and foreknowledge of God. This was God's plan all the way along. Sorry, atheists who thought this was a bad idea. This was the pre-idea. It wasn't an afterthought. It says God raised him up, loosing the pangs of death, because it was not possible for him to be held by it. For David said concerning him, and et cetera, et cetera. So it says here that God raised him up. Then it says in Romans chapter 8, verses 11, it says, if the spirit of him who raised Jesus from the dead dwells in you, he who raised Christ from the dead will also give life to your mortal bodies through his spirit who dwells in you. So it says that the spirit raised Jesus from the dead. So Jesus, when they asked him, by what authority are you doing these things? He said, tear down this temple and in 3 days I will raise it. So the claim is made by the scriptures that Jesus rose, he raised himself. And it also says that God raised him, and it says that the Spirit of God raised him. So we see clearly from these passages of who Christ really was. Christ was the incarnate God. And so the question becomes, the question that drove this for me in the first place was there not a better plan? And then some of our adversaries in faith would say, well, God wouldn't be three people. He wouldn't be, he wouldn't have sacrificed himself. There wouldn't be all of those kind of things. And would say, and then I heard the question posed recently, where does it say that Jesus said, I'm God and worship me? Well, I worship God. That's what I do as a human being. I am compelled and I am honored and I am driven to worship the one and only true God. And this is why we establish who Christ is. Christ is part of God. And that word, when it says he dwelled for a while among us, the word there is actually tabernacled. He was holiest of holy among us. And that's why the word speaks for itself. And that's why the word needs to be released like a lion. And that's why we need to profess and preach the good news of Jesus Christ, because he took upon himself our iniquities and he was crucified on the cross, the perfect sacrifice for our sins. And all we have to do is accept it and believe it. God bless.